The impact of corporate governance in Caribbean organizations. According to R.A.G. Monks and N. Minow 1995, corporate governance refers to the relationship among participants in determining the direction and performance of organizations. The primary participants are the shareholders, the management, and the board of directors. On the other hand, Oliver Friedman and Mirta Kapoor said corporate governance is about the definition of property rights of shareholders and the mechanism of exercising such rights. In trying to satisfy the needs of various stakeholders whose objectives may not be necessarily the same, corporate governance must be guided by the need for equity within the organization and the wider community. The impact of corporate governance within Caribbean organizations has been low, and its guidelines has been heavily influenced by international developments. According to the Caribbean Trade and Investment Reports 2005-2006, in a search for good corporate governance, the Caribbean is not responding to any major corporate failure, and therefore the approach tended to be slow, with little pressure coming from governments, the academic community, the press, and civil society. This is unlike in the developed world, where the development of corporate governance codes has been the result of failures and public demand for reform. To this end, several Caribbean governments have enacted legislations, namely the Companies Act, in an effort to influence a culture of corporate governance. In contrast, several financial institutions, utilities, credit unions, and other entities which have a large customer base and the use of public assets are often registered under legislations that do not prescribe any standard of corporate governance. The countries of the Eastern Caribbean have developed codes and principles. For example, in Jamaica, the private sector organizations in 2005 published a code of corporate governance based on the 2003 Combined Code of the Financial Reporting Council of the United Kingdom. However, the rest of the Caribbean have held seminars and workshops initiated by the central banks, the private sector, and the accounting profession. Their effort was to promote awareness of the importance of good governance. However, the institution of corporate governance within Caribbean organizations has had a low impact. A low impact because of the following reasons: widespread cross-directorships, widespread conflicts of interest, concept of the independent director is difficult to apply, highly unregulated private sector, little strategic changes over time, poor monitoring and enforcement of governance-related requirements, state-owned enterprises with politicized board members, limitation of the power and authority of regulators, limited enforcement of laws, limited consequences of non-compliance. The Caribbean's initiatives to date have been limited to some countries' efforts in the areas of training of directors and the development of specific codes. The first ever Caribbean-wide corporate governance forum was held in 2003 by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. At the forum, draft recommendations for a Caribbean Code of Corporate Governance in securities market were established. In 2003, the Central Bank of Barbados held a conference on corporate governance, which was aimed specifically at the financial services sector. Although standards and best practices were examined by the conference, no corporate governance principles were issued. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange have been the driving force in propelling the Caribbean region towards having a harmonized set of corporate governance provisions. However, regrettably, the efforts of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to have a Caribbean-wide code do not appear to have won favor throughout the region. Even the efforts of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States itself appear to have been diluted into a statement of principles rather than a mandatory code. Caribbean organizations, including professional accountants academics, writers, and members of the business community need to apply their minds to a model of corporate governance appropriate to our circumstances in the Caribbean. While it is unquestionable that we cannot reinvent the wheel, wholesale importation from different markets and circumstances is equally unproductive. The small market, limited pool of talent, close personal relationships, and the consequential difficulties in finding independent directors are perhaps the most significant factors facing Caribbean organizations in the area of corporate governance. Thank you.